education in Washington state is not doing well. And that's just a fact. It's just a fact. I mean, when Mississippi is outperforming you, you really have to sit there and be like, are we really the world-class state that we pretend to be? And there's a lot of reasons for this, but, you see it in the figures that math, reading, science, kids aren't performing well. The attendance is going down. The enrollment is going down. And I tie it to the focus on radical gender ideology. Now, I have no way to quantify that and say, here's the proof that when we started, pushing radical gender ideology on kids instead of focusing on academics, that's when test scores went down. I think keeping kids out of school for as long as our state did really had a profound impact on educational outcomes. But a lot of what we use to make those assertions is from the state's own website. The state has to post this monthly data on how kids are performing, and they're not performing well. And at the same time, we've spent more and more money on education as the years have gone by. So it's more money, worse results. And everyone should be upset by that. And again, it's just a fact. Well, not according to Superintendent of Public Instruction, Kruse. So we had this long press conference yesterday where he's sharing the latest data on academic outcomes and talking about and he did acknowledge in parts of it that we're not doing well in certain areas. And he talked about how we're going to move forward. But he also, this is crazy, he also put this graphic up. And let me actually play the video first, where he's saying, oh, there's a lot of misinformation out there about how our kids are actually performing.
Here's the kind of headlines that do that. We know there are folks consistently wanting to sort of attack public education. I will say, I don't ever want to question their motives when it comes to caring about kids, because I know a lot of these folks, and we work with a lot of them from these think tanks and these organizations. I think they care a lot about kids. I think we all do, and that's what makes this work so exciting, is we're leaning into what can we do to improve learning in the state of Washington. What's not okay, though, is to misuse information or to knowingly understand what the data says and then state it differently in order to move a political point. And so we're going to do a little bit of that myth busting today, again, not in a questioning people's ultimate motives, but in really trying to understand what are the facts of this thing. So if we have common ground, we can work on common solutions and common investments, whether they're federal, state, or local level. So to all of you watching, whether live or recorded, I really want to challenge you to reach out and get the actual information and understand what the data points mean before we make assumptions like half our kids can't read or kids are not as smart today as they used to be. Those are both factually inaccurate.
Oh, yes. So if you want accurate information on how our students are performing, go to the guy who has the most at stake and the most to gain by giving you inaccurate information. What would I gain by lying about academic outcomes? When we do that on the show, what do? What graphic do we show? We literally, every time, Nicole or I, we go to the same place and we do a screen grab. And then we just put the screen grab on the air. And where is it from? It's from the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. And it shows where kids are at in relation to their grade level for math, reading, and science. And then it shows enrollment and all of the numbers and how much we're spending per each student. And that's what we put up on the old screen. And somehow that's misinformation. Fascinating, isn't it? And do you have a close-up, a still of this, because it was kind of hard to see in his, So he includes one of my ex posts in his, these people are spreading misinformation. Here's what I wrote. I said, while test scores are in the toilet and enrollment is down, the State Board of Education is making equity its top priority for 2025. What's untrue about that? They literally released their top priority for 2025, and it was equity, despite our test scores being in the toilet. And that's just an opinion. That's not misinformation. How do you prove or disprove that test scores are in the proverbial toilet? And enrollment is down. Enrollment is way down. So he's accusing me of spreading misinformation when I'm just stating truths. And if you're embarrassed by the fact that while we're declining in academic outcomes and enrollment is down, that you're focusing on equity, that's a you problem. That's not really a me problem. And all the deflection continued from there. So one of the areas where he would acknowledge we're in a bad place is math. Kids can't do math very good, it turns out. And we know that because, again, we keep sharing the test scores and the data and the information. But of course, he has to couch that somehow. gosh, I can't fudge the numbers. So how do I couch that so it doesn't seem like such a big deal? So he goes on this long rant about how, well, math is, not, our math isn't good, but it's not good elsewhere. And, America has never been strong at math compared to other countries.
In math, the United States has never performed with their peers globally across the U.S., despite our economic prowess, despite our innovation, despite our creativity, despite all of our STEM growth. We're an economic superpower, but traditional academic math that prepares you for traditional college mathematics is a place where the U.S. student base has never competed as effectively against the world. And that's what you see in that middle chart. The world is ahead of us. The world is declining. Again, something's happening to youth across the planet, especially after 2010, 2012.
Total mystery.
And our gap's actually a little smaller now than it was 20 years ago. But this is the second red flag I have for you on math. It's a United States problem, not just a Washington State challenge.
It's like, okay, what use are you? Oh, it's not, well, I guess we just give up then, right? Let's just resign ourselves to the fact that China is outperforming us in math, so it's totally fine for us to be paying all this money for public schools and for academic outcomes in math to be awful. I mean, the excuses from this guy. This one has to be my favorite, though. So you kind of heard him reference it there that, there's also a decline in math globally. And so since 2010, 2012, something's happening to our kids. It's a mystery. So, of course, again, don't blame us. The children of the world just suck.
There are forces acting against youth across the planet that make their traditional test scores continue to go down using traditional metrics. But they are as innovative and as creative and as adaptable as we've ever seen them. And that's a real dichotomy for us. So there's a real legitimate criticism, I think, that we all have to own on whether we're moving test scores. But there's a bigger narrative we have to talk about, from the media to higher education to our business leaders to those of us in education and those in the legislature, that says, what are these things so enormous in the lives of youth in the United States and around the world that despite our investments, they're holding their own. They're just not making leaps and bound gains. We're not seeing it anywhere on the planet at scale.
So it's this amorphous, something's happening with kids. So don't blame me. Your kids are morons, But it's also, I'm sure every single one of you knows what's happening with kids. Since roughly 2010, takes a rocket scientist to figure that out. Social media. Screens, computers, decline in learning, spell check, AI now, you name it. Kids don't have to think critically anymore. And then in your schools, Chris Reichdahl, you don't force them to think critically, because now, of course, grades are racist and checking attendance is racist and making sure that kids behave at school is racist. So you've taken out any sort of consequences for not thinking critically and having academic outcomes. And you're just I don't know, something's happened with kids since 2010, 2012. So don't blame us. It's happening all over the world, and, don't look here. Isn't that crazy? All the more reason to allow parents to take the money that they spend on our public education system through their taxes and send their child somewhere else. Maybe to a school that has figured out that since 2010, kids have changed the way they learn. Since 2010, the world has changed around our youth. And now there's so much happening in a digital world. Maybe we can take them to a school that has figured out that great grand mystery that you can't seem in 13 freaking years to figure out. So if you can't figure it out in 13 years with more money than you've ever had before, how to teach kids who are living in this new digital world, then maybe you should let parents take their kids elsewhere and somewhere where they can figure that out, huh? Seems like a good idea for me. But what do I know? I'm not the superintendent of public instruction. I'm just a lady with a podcast.